Welcome to the Virtual Institute for Capacity Building in Higher Education, Vicbhe, Module 9, Writing Grant-Winning Proposals and Fundraising. Today is the 22nd of September, 2024, and we're going to be looking at the grading of Practical 6, Budgeting for Research Projects. I'm Eyitope Ogunbodede. Budgeting for research projects. Now, let us see what did we intend to do with the assignment that we gave to participants. The aim of the assignment was to provide practical experience in developing a comprehensive budget for a research project, ensuring that participants can explain the key components of budgeting and can justify and align their budgets with project objectives and funding requirements. Now, we have 5 steps to that assignment. Step 1 is to choose or propose a research project. Step 2 is to provide a brief overview of the project. Step 3 is to develop a comprehensive budget for the research project. Step 4 is to write a budget justification. And step 5 is to align the budget with the funders' guidelines. Now we're going to look very closely into each of those 5 steps. In step 1, we expect the participants to choose their existing research project or a new one in their field of interest. The project should have a clear objective, scope, and expected outlines or outcomes. In step 2, we expect that the participant will provide a brief overview of the project. That is, write a summary of a maximum of 300 words, including the title and main objectives of the project, the key activities or tasks required to achieve the objectives, the expected outcomes and impact of the project, and the duration of the project. In step 3, we expect the participant to develop a comprehensive budget for the research project, and then to identify budget categories and items. Break down the project into specific budget categories, such as personnel costs, equipment and materials, travel costs, consultants and subcontractors, publications and dissemination, indirect costs, and then contingency funds. And then in the next step, which is still part of step 3, we expect the participants to estimate costs for each budget item, such as the personnel, to specify rules, salaries, time commitment, and fringe benefits. And then for equipment and materials, to list all required items with unit costs and quantities. And then for travel costs, to calculate costs for transportation, accommodation, meals, and per diem. And for the indirect costs, to determine overhead rates as per their institution's policy. And then at this level, we expect that they will create a budget table, and then that the table should include the budget categories, the items, the cost estimates, the justifications for each item, and then the total amounts, and ensure that all calculations are accurate and properly documented. What are we expecting in step 4 is to write the budget justification, justify each budget line items, write a justification for each item in the table, and then to explain why each cost is necessary for achieving the project's objectives, discuss how costs align with the project scope, timeline, and expected outcomes, and to provide assumptions or evidence supporting the cost estimates. And then in step 5, what are we expecting? We expect the participants to align their budgets with funder guidelines, and then to assume the project is being submitted to a specific funding agency. The candidate will have to pick an agency from the list provided for them already, and then review the agency's budget guidelines, including allowable costs, indirect cost rates, and budget formats, and then make any necessary adjustments to their budget to ensure it complies with the funder's requirements. And then we expect at this point that they will give the name of the funding agency that they have aligned their project with, and then to also explain briefly the changes made to align it with the funder's requirement. And then what did we give to the participants as the submission guidelines. I mean, participants were requested to submit all parts of the assignment in a single document that is in one file, and to ensure that the file name of their practical must begin with their surname and first name and practical 6, e.g. Ogunbode-Eyitope-practical 6. Not to style their headings and then to submit latest by 12 noon on Saturday, September 21, 2024, to both the online form using the link supplied to them and the Vicbhe app. Now, let us go to the evaluation of this practical. The submissions are to be assessed using the following criteria. 1, the project overview, that will be 50 points. The budget table, that will be 150 points. The budget justification will be 60 points. The funder guidelines, alignment to the funders' guidelines will be 40 points. And then the total will be 300 points. We will now look at each of these 4 steps and then see, have a breakdown of what we expect at each of the steps. Step 1, project overview, 50 points. Clarity and completeness of the project description. We expect that the summary that will be submitted concerning that project will include the title, and that will be 10 points. The main objectives of the project, that will also be 10 points. The key activities or tasks required, that will also be 10 points. And then we expect that they will also include the outcomes and impact, which will also be 10 points. And then the duration of the project will be 10 points. And then step 2A now. So that will be, step 2 is going to be 150 points, but that is divided into 2 parts. The first part is the proper use of a budget table, spreadsheet, or template with columns for categories, items, cost estimates, and total amounts. That will be 12 points. And how are we expected to score this? The budget categories, you put a column for the budget categories, that will be 5 points. A column for the items will be 5 points. Cost estimates will be 5 points. And then the total will be 5 points. And now let's go to the items. Identification of specific budget categories and estimation of costs for each budget item. This is going to be scored subject to a maximum of 130 points. The personnel costs will be 20 points. Equipment and materials will be 20 points. Travel costs will be 20 points. Publication and dissemination will be 20 points. Indirect costs or overheads will be 20 points. Contingency funds will be 20 points. And when you add this together, it will be 120 points. But when they now mention consultants or subcontractors, that will be an additional 10 points. And then if they now have a category for other items, or they list some other items, that will also be additional 10 points. And the total will be 130 points. You agree with me that if they list many items, after the 6 that we first mentioned, that is from personnel cost to contingency funds, they may have more than 130, but you score subject to a maximum of 130 points. And then when you check the calculations, if it is inaccurate, then you deduct 10 points. If the calculation is inaccurate, then please deduct 10 points. So then we now look for a budget justification. That will be step 3. They write a justification for the budget, and that will be 60 points. So the justification must be clear, it must be logical, must be well supported for each budget line item. The relevance of the cost of project objectives and scope will also be there. And so when there is a justification for the personnel cost, you give 10 points. For if there is justification for equipment and materials, you give 10 points. There is justification for travel costs, you give 10 points. Justification for publication and dissemination, 10 points. Indirect cost, 10 points, and contingency funds, 10 points. So the total score for budget justification will be 60 points. If they have mentioned any other points outside these categories that we have mentioned, so it will not attract any additional points. But you look for these 6 core areas, and if they have justified their budget in those areas, then they score the maximum of 60 points. Now, how are we going to assess the alignment with the funder's guidelines. So this will be 40 points. If they name the funding agency to whose guidelines the budget was aligned. So once the agency is named, you give 20 points. If there is clarity in explaining the adjustment made, how did they adjust it to the guidelines of the funding agent, then you give 20 points. Now let us look at the summary, of the scores. So when you look at the summary of what we are recommending as the scores, find that the project overview will be 50 marks, budget table will be 150 marks, the budget justification will be 60 marks, and then further guidelines alignment with the guidelines of a funding agent. So the funders guidelines alignment, so will be 40 points. Now, let me also say that for this one, there is no penalty for writing more than 300 words or writing more than 1,500 words. We are not going to penalize the participant for whatever number of words they have used. And I think with this, it should be very clear how we should score for practical 6. So thank you very much. And then we are also going to be sending to you as an attachment a write-up, a brief write-up on what you need to do, which virtually explains what is in this video. Thank you very much for your attention, and God bless you.